call to order the Board of Selectmen special meeting for, this is a meeting we have on a regular basis, but it is a special meeting as compared to our normal scheduling meeting, and this is very specific to the budget. It's a discussion on the 2025 fiscal budget recommendations to be filed with the Board of Finance. Our intent here is to review the information that we received from the different departments, indicating what they needed in going into our next fiscal year, and identify what we want to do in terms of allowing for those changes or recommending to the Board of Finance that we leave those changes or we act on some of them and make some adjustments based on a couple of things, not the least of which is how much it is. So with the input and guidance from Tony, we've reviewed a lot of this, so Tony has a lot of input that he'll be going over in terms of some of what we'd like to recommend, but I want to make sure that the board understands these are recommendations. It's up to us to determine what we really want to do with it, and that's what ultimately at the end of our session we'll vote we want to send to the Board of Finance. There are a couple of elements that I particularly wanted to mention, one of which is the pool is a big part of this, and what we took a look at after talking to a number of different stakeholders is that we may not want to fund the operation of the pool going into the next budget cycle. So you'll see that reflected in terms of what's here. It's not to say that there's a final decision as to what we'll do with the pool. Obviously, it's certainly a harbinger of what could be done, but I would like to make sure that we have some sort of plan as in terms of what we might do on a more permanent basis there. And we have until basically July to really make that assessment and determine what we want to do. But in the meantime, the feeling is that we will not fund it because of the dollars associated with continuing to fund it, particularly in light of the additional repair work that would be required in order to bring it up to a standard that we know we can be functional and the way we need to be and the way we want to be going for the year. So with that, I'll turn it on over to Tony so that he can start to go over the details in terms of what adjustments we've made, and we can start discussing whether we want to go along with those, not go along with those, or whether you want to make some on your own.
Thank you. So the first thing I want to do is go through the documentation that was sent to you. So this is so we all understand the first is a budget summary. Looks like this, and this is you'll see the Board of Selectmen recommended column are exactly what Nika mentioned, just simply some suggestions for your review, and that would result, as you can see, it's a 4.43% increase in expenses, 11.84% increase in non-tax revenues, a 3.63% increase in taxes, and a mill rate increase for real estate and personal property of 3.99%. So that gives you sort of the summary of all of the inputs to the budget process, and so it gives you the bottom line figure there. The second is similar information, just grouped by major category, and gives you the grand list information. It's the same information, it just shows you the grand list. It's complete, so you can see the different components of the grand list.
What is that title, Tony?
Net adjustment.
Tax, the form?
Yes.
Yeah, it's mill rate calculation sheet.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's important to show you the parts of the grand list that that exist. And particularly, you'll notice there's reserves for uncollected taxes. Those, you know,
I'm sorry, just an adjustment. The name of the sheet is tax calculations.
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay. And it's the few lines up from the bottom.
Yeah, the file's called mill rate.
Got it.
Right.
Right, I think that's what it said in your memo. I wanted to make sure it matched the way you worded it in the memo.
The third is the detailed line item budget. These are all the department detailed budgets. And these again all tie up to the summary sheets. Fourth is the revenue estimates, which are the non-tax revenues. And finally, capital budget. Capital budget is the last department on the summary. It's also called transfers out and other financing uses because we essentially, those are interchangeable in terms of the capital budget is a separate fund, it's not part of the general fund. So it's a multi-year fund that does not lapse. So when you have a capital budget, many capital projects could take a few years. So the fund does not lapse, like the general fund. General fund at the end of the year, it lapses, and if the money's not spent, it goes to the fund balance. With the capital budget, the money does not go anywhere essentially until until it's spent or it's transferred for another use, which we've done in the past. So those are the documents. The other thing I want to just pass out here, I like to, I've done this the last few years. So this is a history of our adopted budget by category. And I sort of did it in 3 different versions, so you can sort of see where I like to use the adopted budget because the adopted budget is your plan. This is the town's spending plan for the year. So this is sort of how you plan to spend your funds each year. So you'll see the top section, it has it by town departments, by Amity, and by the Woodbridge Board of Education. So you'll see that percent change over that time period is 11% for town departments. This is from 2016 to 2024. 33% for Amity and 26% for Beecher, Woodbridge Board of Education. So you can, I also did a percent just averaging by year. So you can see the funding there. So then I took the town section, which is the next set of, it's all the same information, just sort of a different way to look at it. And I took out debt service and capital because I wanted to see, sometimes that can skew your information because sort of they're not really operating costs, rather they're capital costs. So you can see that, of course, the 2 school amounts remain the same. Our debt service and capital, if you combine them, it's essentially your capital spending has gone down by 1.55% in that time period. That's, and the town departments are 14% increase. When you look at capital, it's sort of a year-by-year thing because it is not necessarily, one year does not necessarily relate to the other in terms of spending like an operating budget would, but that just gives you an idea of how much we've spent over the years.
So Tony, capital is
The
the
capital budget, fire trucks.
pay-as-you-go.
Pay-as-you-go, right.
And debt service is the cost of carrying the bond.
Correct,
Okay.
that's correct. So you'll,
Financing.
the financing, that's correct. So you'll see that it increases slightly to, it's the debt service now, until 2018. And then hovers around 2.8 million there for a few years, and then in 22 it drops 2.2 million, and then in 24 to 2 million, and then this year it drops to 1.6 million. So our debt service has dropped significantly over the past few years. And finally, I just sort of broke the town government up by a few different categories. So you can see one that's interesting and that's worth noting is community services, which is essentially recreation, a library, and human services. It's actually lower now than it was in 2016. The public safety is up 21%. So it kind of shows you where your priorities have been in terms of funding over the past, 8 years or so, 5 years.
And then for benefits, that line is capturing benefits for everyone except Amity has their own benefits line, Woodbridge.
That's
Board
correct.
has their own.
That's correct. So that would be benefits for the town government, public safety, public works. So this
Because
study find that
those
interesting.
numbers are not in their individual budgets, so we see the benefits for everybody across the board, so we can't really see what's police versus library versus.
I would have to, that would be
We don't have to look at it that way.
well, I would be a more involved analysis. I could do it, but it would be a,
It's just important to know that it's all together.
yeah, it's all. So, I just thought I'd hand that out.
So everybody understands the significance and the impact of, what this is showing us. In other words, you know, just from my perspective, town departments, over the last 10 years have gone up a total of 14% from 10 years ago, as opposed to the school systems, which have gone up 33% and 26% in the same period of time. And also very, very telling is what Tony said in terms of the different, when you look at it from a aggregated departmental standpoint, general government, public safety, public works, it also is very indicative there as to where we're spending our money, where we have been spending most in terms of operations. And I mean, it's consistent. I don't think it shows us something that's not necessarily the case in most towns. But it's just at least an indication as to what has been happening in town government. We have been, Tony in particular with Beth and the other selectmen before, have been trying to maintain and decrease the costs of our governmental side of the house wherever it was possible, and that's why it's reflected, the numbers reflect what it does.
Well, the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance have direct control over all these budgets, and we don't have direct control over the Woodbridge Board of Ed or the MBA. So
Very good point.
Can you just clarify why town departments, the top line is 11.21%, and town departments in that top line of the second section?
It's 14.08.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Oh,
The town
so-
departments on the top line includes capital and debt
Oh,
service.
it includes that,
Yeah.
thank you. You
It-
probably said that before.
Right,
I was like-
so then I thought, I wanted to get the true operating cost of town government, so that's why I took those out. So
Thank
you could sort of see,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I had a feeling, because debt service went down so much, I knew that was gonna skew the number a little,
Mhm.
because it dropped so much.
And Tony, the first sheet you reviewed with us, the Finance Department 2024-25 budget, that depicts the 4.43% total expenditures. That's your recommended after hearing all of,
This is our recommended, these are just, these are suggestions, recommendations for the board to consider.
okay. Do you have the number of, if we were to accept everything, what that would be again? It was like
It's
6?
right there in the same document.
Yeah. It's,
Tell me where.
you mean what the mill rate increase would be?
With all the departments, after having reviewed everything the department said was needed, where did that leave us? And I believe it was something in excess of
8?
something along
Yeah,
those
I'll tell you
lines.
one second.
Thank you. I'm just trying to assess the
It's good to get
difference.
perspective. Yes.
Oh, yeah, we should do this first.
8.4%.
Alright, so almost
Yeah.
half.
A little bit more than half
Yeah.
is what we, and that was, wasn't necessarily arbitrary. The sense was, we didn't feel like we should be over 4%. in terms of-
There was, we did, not only did we do expenditure reductions or adjustments, but also some revenue increases, which I'll go over also. I think probably the best places, the last thing I want to mention is, so this budget, to sort of continue this, I didn't do it by all these categories, but this Board of Selectmen recommended column that you have in front of you, the town departments are 2.84% increase in expenditures. The,
Is that Tony? I'm sorry.
I didn't hand this out, I'm just
Okay.
telling you this verbally. Amity is 5.82, which you can see on the sheet there. And this Woodbridge Board of Ed is 3.89. So, and capital is 8%. Those are the 4 categories.
The other consideration taken on this, I mentioned the pool, the other one was that we felt from a salary standpoint that the cost of living would be the extent of the increases we were doing for this particular budget, based on everything that was required.
So does that mean the fire departments, I believe they asked for more, or they might have been the only department?
There's a couple of part-time ones,
Okay.
but that was the major one. So I think probably the place to start is the capital budget.
Mhm. Is everybody comfortable with where we are in the information? So again, the total that was requested was 8.4, 8.6,
Yep,
and we are 8.4, and we are at
3.9, four,
No.
yeah, essentially 4%.
4% is on the mill rate, correct?
Correct.
The actual taxable increase is 3.63, is it? Am I
Right,
reading that
that's
correctly?
correct, that's
So
correct.
in terms of the mill rate's at about 4, and the actual increase in taxes from the tax perspective would be about 3.63.
Right. Shows the impact of reduction in the grand list has.
Yes.
So just for maybe folks looking in from home, the online budget tool that's available now, I know what you've covered here in these PDFs is also available there, and people can take a look, and is it up to date, or it'll be after we make
After,
these
right,
recommendations tonight, that
Correct.
column will appear,
correct.
so people can kind of follow along from home.
Will it appear after our comments, or will it appear after the Board of Finance?
So, no, so this evening, this evening after, if you vote tonight
Mhm.
to make a recommendation to the Board of Finance,
That'll be-
then that'll be on, that's the next part.
Mhm.
And then Board of Finance, makes their recommendation, that's the third step. And then
Sounds good.
Okay. So, if you take the capital budget, I actually have an update on this. The first department is assessor, and, I actually spoke with her, yesterday, and she said that she's, that could be changed to 50,000.
50.
Yeah,
The recommendation,
correct,
well, that's nice.
yeah.
Thoughts?
Much better than
And the way to go about this is we go along, and if there's things you want to discuss specifically, if you don't feel we should do one, or you feel we should, maybe we can we can cut, or we can add. So if what's being recommended seems to be fine with everyone, then just indicate that and we'll move on, so we can, or do you want to just move on to the whole thing and then go there, or do you want to I just want to make sure we don't, I think it'll be harder to go back, because there's a lot of this. So I think we should just hit it, as we go through it, just yea or nay, in terms of not a vote, but just at least continue.
Sure. My understanding is with the assessor, this is something that has to be done, because this is where.
Revaluation is coming in
Correct.
October, and then
Correct.
we always
Yeah.
need somebody to work with. Yes, correct.
Okay. For the Woodbridge Board of Education, we, as you can see, we selected the, for funding the fire panel upgrade, the ADA playground equipment, and that's leverages $20,000 in grant funds. So that's $30,000 from the general fund and $20,000 in grants. And the building expansion and reorganization project.
Tony, the reason it's on here as 50,000 is because we pay it and get reimbursed.
Correct. But the expenditure is 50,000. But if you look at the funding on the last page of the document, you'll see it has $20,000 in other grants.
And that's reflected in the tax impact,
Correct.
it's 3.63.
That's correct, right. It reflects the fact that we're getting $20,000 in grants, so really only $30,000 is in the tax, raising taxes. So if you were to cut, say for instance, if you were to cut this, you wouldn't cut 50,000 off the budget, you cut 30,000 off.
So Tony, with the roof replacement and drainage, those first two numbers, that's
It's already
because
been
it's
approved.
already gone to
Right.
bond, so it
Right.
sort of last year it was hanging out to be bonded.
Right.
And now it's kind of gone off and been bonded now.
Right.
Okay.
So when it comes to bonded projects, this is this is strictly only a plan, has no legal or binding, there's nothing binding to it at all, other than it's just a plan for all of your capital projects moving forward. If that makes sense. If you're gonna do a bonded project, you have to go through the process of approval like we did for the roof. This is just a place for the public, for bond rating agencies, to see, get a picture, and for planning purposes, to get a picture of, full picture of all your capital requests.
Right. So last year at this time, we also had like items that said things like parking lots and sidewalks.
Right.
Which got pulled into
Pulled
that
in,
bigger
right.
project. But we had building security upgrades as well. Has that been pulled in, or that's really not pulled in, and then it's
I'm not
also
sure.
not here?
I'm not sure.
It's not something they specified
They
in
didn't
their
indicate it
request.
in their request.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that was one of the questions I had here, is that last year we had it as a line, and now we don't have it as a line, and I wasn't sure if it's because we've satisfied all the needs, or
I
they're
do
gonna
know from-
reappear.
Yeah. I don't know if all of those ones that were outlined last year were, but I know from the budget surplus last year, in addition to the monies for Silver Petroselli that was returned back to the town, I do know that they took care of some of those items with some of that operating budget excess from last year. I don't know if it was all of them, but I do know it was some of them.
Okay. So other than that, so these two numbers together are totaling what we approved for bonding, right?
It's a little more,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a little higher than
yeah,
that.
that was the request. So it was, at the time they made the request, that was a fluid situation, which is why those numbers are a little different.
Yeah. All right, and
Okay.
then I guess I had another question just with regard to the building expansion and reorganization. That dollar amount has shifted from the last time we saw it. Here, we actually had 9 million in out years, in 27, 28, and 29.
Right,
We had a total of 9 million. That, I assume, was projecting that we would actually build something.
right.
Yeah.
So that was, they amended their request to remove that 9 million and to add in this $160,000 request for
Planning.
planning, right?
So how do we recognize, though, that they're planning to do something, at least along the lines of what they presented last year, which was $9 million worth of work in 27, 28, 29 total? Do we expect to see that number somewhere in the out years of the 6-year plan?
I would think it would depend very specifically on what we find out with the result of the monies we're investing here.
Right.
Working with a particular consultant or working with, doing a feasibility study, which I think is one of the steps. Once we identify what that tells us, we'll be in a position to more tangibly identify what those costs would be. But yes, in answer to your question, we would wait until then and then put the numbers in there.
Okay, and then just logistically, if the town is taking on in the capital non-recurring pay-as-you-go portion of the budget, the cost of engaging a consultant, is that something that the town will put out an RFP for that, or are we just inheriting an RFP from Beecher, or sharing the costs, or?
The town would allow Beecher to select to work toward the RFP, since they're probably in a better position to determine who that should go out to and who should be included, that type of thing. And understanding that obviously we will fund it, and that's, we had agreed on that a couple of meetings ago actually, that we support that doing that and also in that way.
Yeah, and I'll make just the comment that that's historically how our agreement has been, is that, the Board of Education will take the lead on, for instance, the fire panel. They'll take the lead on putting an RFP out for the fire panel, designing the fire panel, all that stuff. Same thing with the playground equipment. They'll take the lead on an RFP and they'll use their purchasing regulations and rules, and they sort of, take the lead on these projects.
To that point, Sheila, though,
We've always done it that way.
yeah, with regard to the current Beecher Building Committee, if we were to amend that charge a little bit when it came to sending out the RFP let's say, if it gets to the point where that, we feel that that's still needed for the feasibility study, would that be something that they would do in conjunction with the building committee that has the board of selectmen representation on it, or?
I don't know that the building committee itself, maybe I'm not understanding your question correctly, but I don't know that the building committee itself would be the ones to recommend
To send out the RFP?
going, you know, how we send out the RFP, who we send the RFP out to, things of that nature. I think they would provide input, just as you said, with some other organizations, not the least of which I think would be the Board of Education. So,
So essentially what we see here is this is a Board of Education capital non-recurring request. So this is money that is going to be administered by them if we put it through.
That's the way it's set up,
Okay,
correct.
all right. And how clear are we on what the 160 actually purchases? Is that something that might be clarified in the weeks ahead?
it will absolutely get clarified in the weeks ahead, and I expect there to be some change in that number.
Okay.
So,
But
So if
for
there's a
now,
change,
we
you
want
can
to
communicate that change, you can make that request to the Board of Finance, and they can make that change in their budget.
but from what I understand from the Board of Ed, the way they do things, I don't think it can be more. They've sent their
Well-
budget, and you've approved the budget as it is.
Well, we could
Correct.
increase it.
This-
We can.
Yeah, so the building expansion and reorganization, part of this money that's being set aside is for that feasibility study. And that's something that would require an RFP and go out to bid for. And this is based on the estimate range that they got from the consulting group about how much that would be.
What we should expect to
And
pay.
what we should expect to pay for the size of our building, but also, we had also asked them that, you know, if there were other sites in town, existing buildings to use, you know, for them to look at those too. So they quoted us on the larger range depending on how much of a study they wanted us to do.
Right, so this is probably, I know I mentioned before, a tri-board meeting kind of discussion, because to get some input from the Board of Finance and then have the Board of Selectmen and the Woodbridge Board of Education talking about it, especially if the Woodbridge Board of Ed is taking the first few steps. So as you said, looking at other buildings in town or other parcels in town, that is something that the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance maybe wants to discuss before it happens. So I know we thought about maybe trying to have a tri-board so we could talk further. And if that happens in the course of our budget planning, we might get more clarity.
And we've talked to the superintendent and the board, as a matter of fact, the chair of the board, in regards to a tri-board meeting, and I'm actually looking forward to it. I think it's a great idea, but I think we need to get a little bit more information, a little bit more definition, and then that way we can start doing it in such a way as we can make decisions while we're there.
I think there's room for that tri-board meeting within that process, and certainly there are parts of these monies that are designated to line items in contracts.
So this is probably obvious, but the money allocated in 26, 7, 8, 9, and so on, that's just for planning purposes, it's not reflected in the summary sheet of.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
it's strictly planning, it's not binding at all.
Okay.
And, I mean, it should be sort of close, so you sort of get an idea. I mean, ideally, the way it should work is next year, 25 should move to 24. There should be some slight adjustment in the numbers, but, and if there's an emergency or something comes up you didn't anticipate, but for the most part, that's how the plan should work.
It also gives you an indication as to whether we moved funds. In other words, we said, okay, we're not gonna fund it this year, versus we say we're not gonna fund it.
Okay.
So if you don't see it in the years to follow, it's saying, no, we're not looking at doing that right
Thank you.
now, or anytime soon.
Do we have any understanding of the ADA needs in the school currently? Like the number of students, I understand even if it's just one, it's enough, but just,
We can get that, and that's something we should alert during the meeting, when they come to the meetings.
okay.
And that's something we should let them know, this time, please bring this information. I think it's a great thing to understand.
Yeah.
So if we could make a note just to add that to their discussion topics, that would be great for our next, that would be the March 13th meeting.
In the superintendent report, you want me to
Yes,
have her bring some
exactly.
information? Yeah, absolutely.
I can say, like, even from our ad hoc discussions about the building last summer, with regard to ADA compliance, there are certain areas of the school that would, need some changing, but a lot of that information would come from the education specification study, which is the first part of the, what they've retained that contract for. And that would give us a very clear picture of what would need to be done for that.
Can I ask a quick question about the elevator? We're not funding it next year, so their request was $64,000. We don't show that in our recommendation, but we do show pushing it out and like more than doubling the cost, so we've
They
got
were looking at it as a phased project, as opposed to, they were looking at more as a placeholder / phased project. So the total cost was about 160,
Correct.
and they were
Their,
splitting it.
correct. Their cost was 160 over 3 years. We did it over 2 years, but pushed it out.
Oh, okay, so that number that was their department request wasn't really 64, it was,
Correct.
okay. So she.
It was 160, but
Okay.
it was 64, 64, and 32.
Right, it was 64, it was 160 over 3 years, so the first year was 64. So their
Okay.
request for this budget was 64.
So that's an interesting, little anomaly of this document then. If they had put it over separate years, the request, it doesn't show up that way. It looks like
Correct.
we cut it.
Right.
So maybe, is it possible that we could say that that 64 was ×3? Just so that it's
No,
clear to the
no.
public that we didn't cut it?
Well, I think it
It's
is.
the same
clear.
dollar amount, right?
On the previous document, it showed 64, 64, 32. We're saying we're not funding any part of it this year. Next year we'll fund 80, or we hope to fund 80 next year and 80 the year following.
Right, but the previous document isn't gonna be visible anywhere, right? That's all I'm saying, is like optically people are gonna think we cut.
I guess we could put an asterisk or some sort of note
Well,
there.
if
Just
the budget isn't visible anywhere, then how would they know it was cut?
Yeah,
It's
Well,
it's
this,
gonna be
this
right, it'll be here.
64, it'll look as though they asked for 64 and we put none of it, but then put 160 hours.
no, because if you look at the previous document, it says 64, 64, and 32. I think I understand what you're saying, but this actually, I think, depicts it more accurately.
Sometimes we have, when we put our final budget document together, there's a place for description of the project. We could certainly put it in there.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Make a note of that.
Just indicate, make a note of it, just so indicating that
Yeah,
we
can do
move the
that.
money to
Yeah.
next year and split it between the 2 years instead of the 3 years. But this year, for the budget, in terms of the budget request for this budget that we're working on, it was $64,000.
You would have raised $64,000 for a project that you wouldn't be doing, because you need to fund all 3 years.
Right.
So we figured that 64,000 would go towards a project that you'll actually complete.
Everybody got that? Board of Ed, all set?
I'll just comment on the Board of Ed funding, is, if you look at 25, it's 243, following year's 274, then 275, then 240. See this, it's sort of more consistent sort of funding.
Smoothing.
Smoothing.
So what, the total 6-year cost hasn't changed, is what you're saying?
Right, right.
Okay.
Okay. The next group is the department's Board of Selectmen department. And this, there were 2 items. The first is the center building renovation, which is, again, just a planning number. You'll actually be hearing a full presentation from the building committee at your next meeting. So you'll be able to, they'll provide a lot of information, and you'll be able to provide guidance to them either at that meeting or a future meeting to sort of give some direction on that. In light of the fact that it was such a large amount, and $145,000 is to start the next phase of the project, which is documents, we felt it was somewhat premature to fund it at this time, until you have a better idea of exactly what you want to do and what that will involve.
So Tony, this includes the enhancements to the police.
Correct.
145 is more for the design and engineering required for it.
To go out to bid.
To go out to bid, correct.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
41,299 is the actual improvements, correct.
Right.
So Dwight Rowland, who chairs that committee, had previously talked to us about, I think, 5 phases, one of which is already underway, which is the gym renovation, so that's completely separate, but that leaves 4 phases. This 145.9 was to start the documentation on all 4 phases at once? Or-
So, the project has 5 phases. This is to start, the bid had 5 phases. Okay? First phase is they're just completing now, which is sort of an overview process, a sort of a 50,000-foot view of exactly what has to get done and how much roughly it would cost. That's the part that they're currently finishing and they'll present to you. In that presentation are 5 phases. There's, the envelope, there's the police, there's the human services wing, there's a bunch of different ways it's phased. And this was phase 2 of the bid, which was to then take the results from phase 1 and create the documentation necessary to have a referendum project, and start refining the drawings so that you can get a better idea of more detail of how much things will cost, and get a design estimate, and then probably bring a construction manager in to help with the moving of people, because you're going to work on, say, the police. You need to move the police out of that area, and including all of their activities. So where would that be? What would you do? How would you do that? There's a lot involved with that.
And that's the $41 million project that's in fiscal 27
Right.
now.
Correct.
And I will say, that may need to be spread out, that's, we're not gonna do that way, so we're gonna,
It's a lot to
there's a lot to discuss between now and the time that happens, and that's why we felt, okay, let's not put the monies in this year, so it gives us the necessary time to really evaluate what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it, and also when we're gonna do it. And that's what I'm hoping this board can come up with prior to the next budget cycle.
So if we did do this and not fund this piece, is there, currently SPNA is under contract to do work, are they going to remain under contract, or are they?
They're under contract to do work as long as there's funding for the work. If that makes sense.
Is this
This is
the funding?
Yes.
So if we remove it as of July 1, when they're done overseeing the part of the project they're working on now, right, the gym
Gym.
renovation?
Right.
They'll be done. And then if we were to need services like that again, we'd go out to bid again, or we
Not sure.
try to,
Yeah.
yeah,
There may be a negotiation.
to be determined.
Yeah, because they have all the background from the first phase.
Yeah, I guess my concern here is only that we know this is almost a 100-year-old building, and we know that it needs substantial outlets for capital improvements. And I remember you telling us also, Tony, that we're at a good place in terms of borrowing.
We are, yeah.
So if we slow down, if we take our foot off the gas pedal at all, how much opportunity do we miss to both get the work done and keep the costs down, because the costs escalate every year, at least in recent memory. So I guess when we have a presentation by the building committee at our next meeting, maybe that's an opportunity. Again, this number could change
It could.
again if we don't
It
do
could.
it tonight.
Yeah.
We could go to the board
Board
of
of
Finance,
Finance
ask
can add
them.
it, can be added at their next meeting, it can be changed at their final recommendation, it can be changed after the budget hearing. Several more opportunities.
All by action of the Board of Finance.
Correct.
Tonight is our last
This is your last
chance to act.
opportunity, right?
I have faith in the Board of Finance. Hope they're listening.
Any other comment with regard to that portion of the Board of Selectmen budget?
It's just amazing how much planning costs.
To say the least.
Yeah.
This is less than the beaches.
This is just to
Right.
determine what you're gonna do, let alone start doing it, so.
Right.
I agree with you.
Eye-opening.
Just to
The next is building maintenance. So in building maintenance, the only two adjustments we made were, because we have some funds remaining in contingency, we felt it would be helpful to start the library roof repair and the center cupola repair this in the spring, and get those watertight as soon as possible, and that's gonna be our plan.
Rather than funding it for next year and having to start it next year, the
Right.
sense was these are these are things that we would like to get done sooner rather than later. It appears so far, there's a long way to go before winter's over, but it appears so far we'll end up with monies that in contingency that we could use this year to get this done. So this is not an indication that we don't want to fund this, but rather this is something that we want to fund sooner with existing budget dollars as opposed to next year's budget.
Correct.
I know I asked this to Bob.
Right.
Is that Bill?
Brad.
I'm sorry, Brad. Will the cupola, to reduce the rate of maintenance over time, can we use PVC rather than wood or something like that? I know you're hearing a forester advocate for a plastic product rather than a wood product. But just, I don't know if those considerations are made or if that's factored into this cost at this stage.
I don't know.
Probably
I don't
not.
believe that
Okay.
it is, but,
We
but
certainly-
also what I would say is in both cases, where you have a roof is the issue, if you fix that issue, if you use wood, it says, the longevity is enough so that it's worth doing it that way. So I think when Brad explained this, it was really issues with water penetration where it shouldn't have been.
Okay,
So if we do what we need to, if we take care of that problem,
Then
it
the
becomes less of an
runoff would
issue in terms of the maintenance of it.
Okay, thank
It just went too long. But it is something that we can ask him about, but, you know, I do know from personal use, residential use, the cost of material on those is significantly different, so I
Okay.
doubt very much that he included in here.
all right, thank you.
So that building as well as this building are part of the historic district. I don't know if that has any bearing on materials, certainly design. The cupola itself is kind of original.
Good question. I know trim is often PVC and it's just made to look up historically accurate.
Because of cost of doing it otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Country Club of Woodbridge, there was no change.
Tony, question about the CCW outbuilding removal and building maintenance.
Yes.
At 70,000. We also allocated funding last year, right, to do something? Maybe it didn't happen, some of these outbuildings, right?
And they took down.
I think some were removed.
They took down a number of the buildings that they could do.
Right.
We took down, one of them was, there's some damage to it, we took that one down. A few have been removed. This
But
is-
not like the halfway house.
Right.
Right.
No.
So
Right.
that would be included.
This is the halfway house, this includes the pool changing room
Mhm.
that's off to the side, that's the pool. It includes
Cart shed and.
the cart shed, the tennis shack,
Is it basically everything?
everything except for the main clubhouse.
Okay.
Right.
And if this goes forward, it happens this summer or?
Yes,
sometime?
it'll happen over the summer.
Okay.
And we think we could wait a year-ish for the boiler replacement in the police department? That's not as time sensitive?
Yes, correct,
Okay.
that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, fingers
Fingers
crossed.
It's an old system.
But that, I guess, is what contingency is for.
Correct,
So
right.
if something,
And your fund balance is to a certain degree, obviously, one
Right.
very much more careful with that, but that's exactly what it's there for.
Yeah.
Fire commission?
Fire commission, we pushed the assistant chief's car out a year, in acknowledgement of the fact that there's a number of other items here. And we we did fund the air compressor, being a more safety issue for us.
The others are very specifically payments that need to be made, so
Correct.
there's not a lot of, there's not a lot to do.
These are lease payments, the
So that's true for engine 3 and 9?
3, 9.
So those are already committed.
air
those,
packs and radio, those 4 are committed. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah.
Air compressor was what they said they used on the larger trucks for the air brakes.
I appreciate you pushing the vehicle out.
Human services?
Human services, we pushed the upgrades for the child center rooms out a year, acknowledging that in fact, should there be any contingency remaining that year, part of this could be done in advance. We can certainly look to do that.
It was only about a month.
Right. It's
Additionally,
only about a month
that was the other big
difference, so-
key is the Woodford Child Center isn't scheduled to be out of there until May of 2025. So we'll be doing, the new budget will start in July of 2025. So if, you know, if worse came to worse, we would fund it in the following year as necessary.
Information systems is a lease payment. That's a committed payment. The library, there was really nothing really there that was of significance. Parks, this is an example of similar to the elevator. The request was for 63,554, but over 2 years. We just pushed it all out to next year. And we'll see how we're doing financially at that time, to see if that's something that's, we can continue to fund or not. We did keep in the vehicle, simply because that vehicle has the very heavy mowers that it pulls around town. And, you know, we're concerned about some of the rot on the vehicle. And it carries a lot of heavy equipment, so. If you've seen it driving around here, you know what I'm talking about. So we'll recycle that vehicle into the fleet though. And we'll still use the vehicle for other things.
But the risk factor on it with the rut was just
Right.
unavoidable.
So Tony, the project we're gonna fully fund in out years instead of some money this year, some money next year is the tennis court repairs?
Right. Correct.
It's hard to keep these lines on.
Next is police. We made a few changes here, suggested changes. The first is funding 1 vehicle instead of 2, as you can see there. The second is the door security, acknowledging that there's a lot of items here. That's not a major item, but we pushed that out here.
Tony, is that the hybrid vehicle? Do you recall?
I know we can certainly work with the chief to, but I believe it was hybrid,
Yeah, he said he was looking at hybrid is what he'd
Yeah.
prefer to get now, it's just a matter of
if they're available.
I don't remember them requesting one. They were requesting 2?
Two of them.
Okay.
How was that put in?
the original
Is
request.
that 80 moved down into one of those other lines then, or is it?
No, just removed completely. Particularly because they have the data terminals, which is a big expense. We felt we could push that, wait until next year to buy 2 cars.
Okay, so
It is pushed.
it is pushed into another.
Well, but he had already requested 2 cars for next year. It's not like we made it 3.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
So they just put a placeholder in for 2 vehicles every year?
Correct.
And it is basically what that is?
That's basically what it is. It's
Okay.
2 vehicles each year. That's
Okay.
correct.
And the door security, that doesn't get them out of compliance with any?
No, not really. It's just for further security. I'm hoping we could maybe fund that in the current year.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was gonna be my question.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah, I think it's probably good for
Based on the
$75. That's our
That
hope,
seems-
yeah.
So is there anything what were the big things omitted? Anything?
one car.
One car,
That's it.
Okay.
Mhm. The other two are
Oh,
also,
non-capital.
the other two I think are required payments.
Correct.
Okay.
The radios are, the portable radios require payment, and so is the body worn
Body worn
cameras.
cameras. So we agreed, we funded the data terminals, the mobile data terminals, which we thought would be helpful, but took out a car as part of it.
Next is pool and gym, and I think this is, requires a little bit of discussion. So the impact of the pool on the budget, including these capital items for the current year, is, this is of net, the revenue, so I took off the revenue first, it's about $430,000. That includes, the utilities at the school, an estimate for that.
As well as costs for labor to support what's the programs and things of that nature.
Correct.
I'm sorry, that's per year?
Well, this year's, includes the capital piece,
Okay.
right? But as you can see, there's capital throughout the budget year. So I think,
235 of capital this year.
Right.
Is embedded in that 430
correct,
overall cost.
correct.
And those utility costs are actually in the Women's Board of Ed budget,
Correct,
right?
right, which they don't have in their budget, actually.
Okay.
They had taken it out, I think, thought that we would have a pool operational.
So with the removal of those items from the Woodbridge Board of Ed, for example, pool, the electricity and all the utilities, and the police officer that they were funding,
Right,
so that their increase in budget also reflects that some of those things, like the police officer we're still having, that's just over into the
Right.
police
Sorry.
budget now.
right, that's correct.
So,
Yeah.
so, you know, when your budget goes up X%, but you've removed a few large items, that's then effectively a larger percent.
Correct, it's
That's
a
true.
bigger increase.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
So in this document, we're seeing the pool structural repairs for 120 and maintenance.
Right, so we pushed that out of here, but if you're thinking of not having the pool, you probably should take all this out. I guess that's my point.
And again, it's a decision that goes beyond the budget. First, it just so happens that our first step with regards to this is the budget. That's what we need to address immediately, so
And when will we be having that bigger discussion?
let me know. Very soon.
So-
Yeah.
I'm sure it's gonna be demanded that we have a discussion very soon, so I would expect.
Right, because if we don't put it in the budget, then
Can't
we've
do
already
that.
had the decision.
If you don't
Well,
have discussion.
For 1 year.
If you
Actually,
don't
I
have
just-
For 1 year.
I wanted to ask about that because I think I remember Brad saying that, that the things that were being done this year, the filter exchange and the, making it ready, filling it with water, would get us about a year, I think is what he told
Could get
us.
us about a year, yes, you're
So-
absolutely right.
In fact, not funding additional repairs in the upcoming budget doesn't mean, if we could have waited for these repairs, that could also be why we're not funding them this year. We're waiting. So it doesn't foreclose the possibility of doing those repairs in the following year, which is exactly what we see here tonight,
When you say the following year, you say
next fiscal year. this
not
one.
the one we're working.
Right, right.
Correct, yes, you're absolutely right.
And I thought I heard him say that he thinks it doesn't need to get done next year. It should be done and it should be on your radar, and he proposed it, but that we had about a year of time on that point. For
So,
what that's worth, I'm not saying that
That's the
should
case with
influence our decision.
capital, but when you get to the operating budget, it's a
Right.
different story.
Certainly.
So does this-
The operating funds.
does this anticipate that we drain the pool again and it's just not used for
Don't let
anything?
it sit there full of water.
At some point in time. It would allow us, for example, the potential, and this is something we really need to talk to Brad in the next couple of weeks actually, to determine is that we could open it from let's say March until June. If we felt that there was value in that and we wanted to do that, it's in a place where it could operate. The problem is it's a temporary fix. We knew that going in, that it's a temporary fix, and the additional costs to truly fix it are extensive. And, you know, the last report that was done, I think in 22, was somewhere upwards of $800,000.
Yeah.
And that was, so that would be what would be next. So at that point in time, if you're going to make those changes, you're gonna drain the pool.
And, yeah, and that was a 2-year fix, I think. Get a couple more years out of the pool.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, just following on her question, because I didn't quite understand, this means that we would be draining the pool because we don't have any money, we didn't put any money into this. And then if we decide to go ahead, we're going ahead with the whole 800,000.
Or whatever it might be. at that time.
We'd have to go ahead and basically do that, or more, whatever.
And that falls in line with Beecher in terms of having them do their feasibility analysis, and which would include determining, all right, what's the option? If we're not going to have the pool there, what's it gonna be? Which I think is really important that we identify and we really do, we determine before we make the final decision. But that'll give us an insight into, okay, so if, let's say, it can be made into classroom space, what's that gonna cost? And what's involved with that? And how does that compare to the other costs? So, there's a lot to it, but in the meantime, for example, this past year, we saved some money because the pool was drained for the largest portion of the year, but we didn't save $500,000. You know what I mean? So, because there was still some operational and different things that expenses we incurred. But we're saying for next year's budget, we're saying we're not putting any money toward this. We're gonna decide what we wanna do over the course of that time and then move forward with based on what we've done. And I feel very strongly it needs to be a long-term plan. It's gotta be something that really gets us long-term to where we wanna be, so every 3 years, we're not here looking at $800,000 worth of expense to try to keep the pool going. So.
And is any of that thinking related to the fact that the school's gonna shut down for the repairs and so
Yes.
forth?
That's why.
We won't be able to use it quite full time, because just to be clear, I know that when we shut down, when the pool was drained and shut down, that when they put water back in it, there were a lot of problems
Right.
from just being drained for that long.
Correct.
And so there really isn't a good option for, oh, well, maybe we could just do the 2 years starting next year. If you drain it again,
Chances
you're
are
gonna have
you're
a
gonna-
host of other problems that come up with it again. So this is kind of a,
It's time to make,
yes,
time to make a decision as to where we wanna go.
it's a full decision at this point. There's no, oh, maybe we can get by for a couple of years and see what happens. All right.
The other from my perspective, personal perspective, from discussing this with a number of the stakeholders, again, for me, one of the very significant factors was the pool cannot be used during school hours, specifically because of the safety concerns that go along with that. That's
You mean
such
by
a,
the public,
I'm sorry?
by the public.
By the public,
Yeah,
correct.
the
by the
school
public.
children.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly,
Okay.
okay? And, you know, like, I hold it close, and it's near and dear to my heart, because that's where my kids learn to
That's
swim,
right.
okay? So, I think that program is wonderful, but when you consider the options in terms of the possibilities, JCC has been very, very, very gracious to us in terms of accommodating things when we needed it, when people were looking for pools. Orange has also helped us in the past, but the fact that it can only be used outside of school hours, and school is in session for 9 months a year, it really limits the amount of time that we can get useful resident use from the pool. But it's a very big expense for that amount of time. And that's something that I hadn't mentioned before, and I just wanted to make sure it was something that people understood. It's like we just can't use it for the public, whereas in the past that was the case. We had a very vibrant early swim program. That's gone. We can't do that anymore. So there's such limited use on it that we really have to make some hard decisions, and I think it's time we do that.
So I just want to speak to the previous renovation work that was done at Beecher, and of course the pool and the dehumidification was a substantial cost. I don't know if we are making a determination we're not going to have a pool here, I don't know if that Dectron equipment has any resale value whatsoever, but it certainly could be decommissioned at a certain point and no longer used. But I will say that when the previous renovation committee was considering investing money in the pool and security, and this is when about $1 million worth of security was put in at the school in the immediate wake of Sandy Hook, there wasn't an understanding that the pool wasn't going to be used during school hours. There were arrangements that were, at least on paper, that there would be an ability to still use it. So just so that the public is aware that, you know, things have changed since that time, but the reason we invested the money we did back in 2013 was an expectation that it would continue to be used. It's been 10 years, we've gotten almost 10 years worth of use out of that Dectron. It certainly did a tremendous job getting humidity out of the building, which used to be present all through the building, based on the pool. I don't know if there's a possibility of relocating a pool somewhere else. I think a pool is a great asset for the town to have. So I'll be interested in our further discussions about it.
It would be a wonderful thing to be a part of a recreation center somewhere in town.
Yeah, and ideally not part of the school, but close enough so that the students, because the Learn to Swim program, which is near and dear to everybody's heart, is also a significant, opportunity for students in Woodbridge that is going to go away with this decision. But if we eventually build a pool close enough that they can get to it without having to get on the bus and go to the JCC, et cetera, there might be something we can do for them.
With more operating hours also, it's something that could also be more revenue generating for the town, if it could be access to different hours.
Yeah, carry its own cost a little more.
Okay, the next is Public Works. We made a couple of tweaks to some of the accounts. I think the biggest item here, which was a very difficult decision, was the roadway construction piece. And that was a difficult decision.
Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, just due to the fact that this is to pave our roads. So the lower the budget, the fewer roads you can.
And our roads are bad.
Yeah.
Our roads are
Yeah.
kind
Have you
of
driven?
embarrassingly bad. I mean, I will say it's typical throughout the state right now for town roads, but
I think it's probably something that other towns do as well. Because it's an easy, it's a spot you can save considerable money. As you can see, we reduced it by $200,000.
but it does come at a
It does.
at a cost because it only, to my understanding, becomes more expensive to repair
That's true.
and
As it gets worse and worse.
as
Yeah,
it gets
that's
worse
true.
and worse.
That's
And
true.
as we were talking about in the early meetings, I mean, and this again is a statewide issue, our infrastructure in general is not built to accommodate our current climate and the trends.
Traffic.
Yes, traffic certainly, and then pair that with the rain events and all erosion, yeah. So I feel that I don't want our taxes to go up anymore, and that our roads and infrastructure really need some investment.
And to be fair, one of the reasons it's always very difficult, and kudos to Warren, because he's got the reputation of doing his budget like it's his own money, which you want everybody to do, and most of our departments do, in reality. There's not a lot of places you can cut $200,000 for a single line item. This is one of them. He's taken these cuts in the past.
We did it last year,
Yeah.
same dollar.
Yeah,
So-
so it's
So
one
is
of
it
those
fair to
things.
say that we'll do $850 in future years if we've
Not necessarily.
got a
If you
trend
could-
here that says we're not doing it?
I mean, if you had, it would be different if you had some growth on your grand list,
Then
or
we
growth
could
in your
afford to
revenues,
invest.
then you can invest in some of these things. But without any growth,
And growth is wonderful, and we've had very little of it throughout the course of the years, but this year in particular, we had a decline
Right.
in our grant list, which really puts us behind, kind of
Right,
puts us
it's that
behind.
decline that puts us behind, that's correct.
You know, so from that perspective, it's, because Warren has taken the hit in the past, I was, coming into this budget thinking, not this time, we're gonna give him the money he needs to do the paving. But when you're limited in terms of what you can actually do to mitigate the impact to our residents, this is an area we felt we wanna do. There's still a substantial money that goes into it, there's still a substantial amount of work we can do. So that's what that's what went into this decision. It was very, very difficult.
Are there grants
But-
available for?
There is, as a matter of fact, we get $100,000 of that is from LoSiP funds
Mhm.
that we use. And then in the general fund, there's about 250,000 of town road aid. So really, of the 850, 350 of it is grants.
But the 200 would be added on top,
On
period.
top of that.
Right.
So, definitely an area, this is the reason we're having these discussions, is to have the discussions, is to, if you feel differently about this, please, let's.
Well, last year we put about $300,000 into the community center that was already we had a grant for, because we thought we wanted to do more. Is that money still available? Could we reallocate it out of that into the roads?
Good.
That's interesting, Dave.
It hadn't been used, right, because it's not finished.
Correct, it hasn't been used yet.
We don't know if the community center is gonna be the greatest hit ever. We could always put stuff
There's
in
some.
later maybe this is something that you can't put in later. I don't know what we allocated it for.
In order to reallocate the ARP funds, you have to go through your appropriations process, which would be this budget process.
Wait, but are you talking about ARP funding? or-
It was ARP funding,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant like we budgeted it, we have.
Well, it was our money.
We did it in last
We
year's
did it
budget
in the
process.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
to allocate,
We allocated.
reallocate the ARP funds if they
Got
haven't been
it.
used,
Got
you
it.
have to do the same thing, we have to put it in this capital budget and reappropriate it
Through a motion at the Board of Selectmen, meeting? Is that what you're talking
tonight.
about?
You have to,
That's an interesting idea. What do you think about
That project's underway, though. I mean, the planning is underway. I realize that hasn't been spent, but the planning for that project.
Well, the planning was already there, and it's just that the plan was, it was a $2 million grant. And then the plan was a giant plan for the whole area. So the plan was way more encompassing than simply the building and it included
The grounds.
landscaping and the grounds and a lot of other things that went up to as much as $5 million. And so it was pretty big. I think, wasn't it, was it that much?
So we didn't authorize it.
No, we didn't authorize, no,
We only
no,
authorized
it was just it was a plan. So, I mean, the plan is kind of like, it was way bigger than what the actual building was. And what we allocated at that time was another $300,000 or so for art funds.
it was 330, just so we can be clear, it was $333,000 for the building and $333,000 for the growth.
So it was
600, correct.
So we allocated an awful lot of money for that project.
And the other 330 was $1 million, the other 333 is for the gym, which we're actually using.
Yeah, right.
And that was a decision we made at this meeting.
At this meeting last year,
Yeah.
correct, yeah,
Yeah.
So let's call it even 333 for each.
right,
Yeah, the 333, yeah, for all those different things.
right.
It's not a big sell for me, because as I said, I'm sincere when I say I would love to see Warren get the budget started in the
Well, given that we know what inflation has done, it certainly has done that to the roads, and we've been doing 850 and less every year. And that can't be keeping up with the same amount of roads every year, because I know he's a magic worker, but there's a limit to how far magic goes in the real world.
I'd be inclined to start off by thinking maybe we split the difference, David, and say we put 150,000 into this, back into this,
Good.
and, that way we're not necessarily debilitating any plan for the.
It's really,
Where on this document is that?
it's not, I have to add it. So when we fill out the final document for this evening, I'll add it to the selectmen's, well, if you're gonna, it depends what you're gonna do with it. If you're gonna add it to roadway construction, I'll put it here. And just, you know, with the note that it's ARP funds.
A
So
reallocation.
the
Correct.
the
Yeah,
impact
I'll
of
make-
that ends up coming out of, because there's a building committee for that project.
Correct, so it'll come out of the project.
So it'll come out of their budget, so then they're gonna find out, you know. You got.
Yeah, well, it's not easy.
Oh, of course. But that's not reflected in this budget here, so their monies aren't reflected in the capital
No.
budget here.
Because it's been approved though.
Right.
That's why.
Can I ask a question about, so what was moving forward with the old firehouse included some asphalt for parking area?
That would be as part of the, well, correct.
They can't open it without.
It does.
Yes, that's part of the
So,
grounds work.
so when we say road work, this is also asphalt. Is it possible that, you know, in the event that we do need the money, is it really a reallocation? If some of the money was, our money was gonna go for asphalt there?
Yes, because we were gonna use it, we'd use it on roads,
Yeah.
not on the parking lot.
So, and those are two different pieces of it.
Yeah.
Okay. But it is all going up. And we're also doing a big parking lot project over at Beach when we bonded too.
Right.
So everybody understands it. We have to invest in asphalt.
Well, you were asking a question about why it,
You get the impact on the building committee and their plans, but also, my understanding is those funds need to be spent.
They do, they need to be, encumbered, or there needs to be a contract with, for their use, with like a builder or, you know, you don't have to actually spend them, but they have to be encumbered by
So-
December 31st. Yeah.
So if, just because we were talking about this could happen now, or maybe has to happen now, but if in a few months we found that project wasn't encumbered, we'd still have time to actually transfer those funds
Yes,
to a different project.
Correct.
So there is, though this is a moment, there could be a future moment to
There could be.
reallocate those funds
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
needed.
But that can only happen with the
Board
board
of Finance,
finance,
right.
doesn't
I'll-
because we will not be.
So
I'll
our last
say,
chance.
I'll say similarly,
Right.
similarly with the money we were planning to use, which was allocated last year for the design documents for the lots of grant for the construction down in the, if you remember, we collected $1 million in.
Business district.
The bulk,
Right.
the bulk
Right.
of the money.
Right, that was for the design, you know, for the grant. And you have to reallocate those funds.
Right.
Mhm.
So there may be a chance later on, if we don't get the grant, to
Correct.
reallocate that.
Correct,
But we had to do it to try to get the grant.
correct, right,
That was the whole,
that was the whole idea.
So we could potentially not change this document tonight with an understanding that if the business district grant does not come through, our intention would be that we would reallocate, but we would need that in the preliminary budget and the
For,
annual.
correct, it's gotta be done by the preliminary,
Will we-
ideally by the,
Yeah.
for the preliminary budget, but definitely after that meeting, the preliminary budget meeting, you have to put it in for the town meeting.
Get to the annual town meeting.
Right.
So will we know that information for that project?
I'm not sure.
well, if we get the grant, obviously that goes. If we don't get the grant, then there's extra money to allocate to something.
Right.
Which would be, in this case, maybe paving.
My sense is, if we're going to use it for roads, we put it in the budget for roads. And we don't wait necessarily to see what happens from various situation. I'm not happy or anxious or excited about pulling money away from the community center project.
No, I'm not either.
There are still a lot of questions related to that. We need to maintain our roads. And it's an area
It's
I've
a
already gotten recently.
prioritization.
already gotten.
We know we need roads.
So it's, my sense is even if we do like 150,000, just to make sure we can do a lot more than what we have here, then I think it's a great idea, David, is what I think.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's a viable, solid idea, so I think we should consider it.
I agree, and, but I'm curious if we can add that number back, you know, we can put 100 or 150 back, but not say that we're taking it from that project.
Yeah.
We can-
You have to.
It's gotta come from.
You have to.
Well, it does have to, at this stage, we have to,
Yeah, we have to.
we have to say that's where it's
We
from.
have to do that too.
Yeah.
Either that or you're gonna increase taxes. If you're not gonna increase taxes.
Sure,
say-
well, I'm saying there's still more spots where finance is gonna take a different take on this too.
We may put it in and they might take it out.
Yeah.
They may.
That's their, yeah, that's their prerogative.
Well, that's what happened last year. We took a little bit out, they
Right.
took a little more.
Yeah.
Right, correct. Okay,
And in a sense, he asked for 850, we'd still be taking, if we put 150 back in,
so,
we'd be at
8.
8, yeah.
850, we'd be at 8, so we're still a little less than what he asked for.
And that's so bad.
I think that's,
Well, half would be 100 too, so we took out 200, so.
no, I'm saying
No,
half of the
there's-
300.
Oh, half.
Half of the 300.
Half of the
Yeah.
300.
Yeah, so last year he requested 850, Board of Selectmen took it down to 750, and then the Board of Finance took it down to 650.
So we might put it back in the Board of Finance.
So we would be looking at putting it back in with the notes as to where it's going to come from.
Correct.
You know, I mean, only the difference between this and I think that might have been,
We just took it out.
right, we were
Right.
saying we're using grant money, we're not using town money for a larger part of what
Yeah.
we're showing here.
Okay.
Is that
And this-
really?
We had
It's fine, yeah.
Are you
reallocation
comfortable with this?
of
It's
the
fine
art,
with me.
some of the art money, from some art
Yeah,
project
here.
that we got going. I mean,
No, I'm just curious if there was already a plan for that,
Plan for it.
for their building committee to use that money yet.
They're
There's-
not
other-
in contract with
The only other place you could take it from is, I'm not sure we'll use all of the money for the business district at this point, even if we do get the grant. So, I'm just not sure how much yet, but there's probably money in that project also.
So Tony, can we, with our motion tonight, can we direct you to look for it from various pieces
Good.
of the ARP fund?
Yeah, I can do that.
So that way we can have some flexibility to maybe find it not coming out of that.
Yeah, I can do that.
I like that a little better as opposed to impacting
Sure. I
one
think you may
person
have
in
money in
particular,
there.
but if there was some room to vote it from the others.
I think there is, yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy to do that.
And do we need to make a motion on this, or do we just?
Okay, I think when you're done with the,
We're just gonna make a motion on the
So-
overall budget.
the overall capital
So
budget.
the understanding is 150, the note that Tony will find it from ARP.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're-
And then either from one of the art projects or that hasn't been used yet.
Yep, I can do that.
So we can keep
Great.
going now.
Thank you, good idea.
Okay. Next is recreation, there was no change there, other than, we eliminated the 90-foot baseball diamond.
From the out years.
And at John's suggestion, we eliminated night lighting for Acorn Fields.
Should take the footnote out then, right?
Well,
The fundraising was,
oh yeah, I guess we could do that, yeah, yeah,
well, they're not fundraising.
The next is the Darling House. This was another, so we put that one out of here. This is the Heist House and Horse Park. And then the last one is waste management with the container.
The Darling House was a challenge only because they have a lot they need to do there, and it's a lot of, it's older structure, so you wanna be careful. What we need to at least have a conversation with them about is their grant situation as to what the impacts are from the grant situation, to make sure we're not doing anything that handcuffs them or puts them in a difficult situation from that perspective. But the thought was just to move it down one more year, just because again, with the situation we're in with the grant list going down, and things of that nature, and with new contracts and new, the wage increases, it just wasn't a year that we could afford to do all of the stuff we would like to do.
Yeah.
When you say grants, could they possibly, you mean going out, if they had a grant to be able to do this work, or?
A lot of what they do, Tony can probably speak to this better than I can, is done with at least some.
Yeah, they usually, most of their work is done with grants, and we have to, a lot of them are 50% match.
Okay.
So this is an example of one that's probably a 50% match on a grant.
Yeah.
For the roof project there?
For the ice house and horse park renovation.
Right,
For the
and
renovation.
that's two buildings, and maybe it's possible to do one first and then the other.
Yeah, yeah.
But if it does affect their grant ability to retain that funding, would that change our recommendation?
It could.
If they need a 50% match on the grant, they're asking the town for it, but I assume they could fundraise and fund the other half themselves. I mean,
That is what we're
They
talking
could,
about.
but
So-
they've done a lot of heavy lifting, I think,
Sure.
on that already.
Yeah.
They've come to us and told us about it.
right, no doubt. So, but these are large numbers, so 133,000. I understand it's a big renovation on the historic property, but that's a big number.
No, it's our property.
Well, sure.
It's like the Senate building, we own it.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could make the same argument for the fire, that they should be fundraising to buy some of the stuff, you know, chief's vehicle, like maybe not the safety stuff that they need, but,
Well, the firefighters raise money too.
yeah.
I guess my point being we're not necessarily cutting off their opportunity to match a grant if they can fundraise.
If they
for
can
it.
fundraise.
That's all.
Yeah, the reality is, Mika, I think it's a great idea that you ought to have a discussion with them, because we've had them sort of in front of the board looking for money, and we've given them the answer, well, we didn't put it in this year's budget, so we can't give you any money. We can't write a contract that says, next year, we will have money for you to, because they write for the grant, and then the money comes in the next year. That's when they need it.
Right.
So we have to say that we're going to give it to them, but it's, if we don't put it in this year, then they can't write the grant for next year, because they'll come to us and say, can you guarantee it? And we'll say, no, because it's not in the budget. And that is where we've said that to them a few times, and, so I think we need to just have a good idea about what their plans are, so that we know what's coming up in that timeline. Because obviously, getting something done for half price for us is a good deal.
Mhm.
And they're doing a lot of the work to get the grants and to do all that kind of thing. And so, the choice is abandon the whole thing, or try to work more with their time.
They certainly do have substantial projects in the out years as well, so
Yeah.
it's probably worth the conversation, make sure that we stay reliable partners too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just know, I think we have to update the name on these documents, right? Didn't
Oh,
they
right,
change
you're right,
it?
it did change. It was a darling, good suggestion. It got
Bonds?
changed.
Is that an
Farms.
action that the board of selectmen has to actually take though, since it's our building? I mean, they should probably put in a request to have
That's a good
us
question, yeah.
make that, because we're
I can, we'll define that, make sure we're legal that what we have to do, and then, take the appropriate action.
I forget, I wrote it,
And something.
it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
That's all.
We know what it's about.
And homestead, I
We know.
think homestead.
Yeah, you said it was in part of it.
Yeah. But I appreciate their intention behind it.
And the roof was something that could be put out a year without causing additional.
I haven't gotten that input from them
Okay.
specifically, as they're learning this as we're learning it.
Gotcha.
That wasn't in the request for this year, right, that 34, we put it to 26, but it wasn't in 20.
It was not.
It wasn't in 20.
I'm
Right,
sorry,
it was
this
not
was
in-
the only thing that was for this year's.
Right,
budget.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. So that's the capital budget, and, so, if we're, vote on that
Yeah, I'll make a
Did,
motion.
now. With
Did
the-
we
Before you do
do
that,
waste
your
management?
waste management?
Oh, yeah, I would just remove the container.
Oh.
Was it 45 for next year before? I just don't recall.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Yeah.
just do that.
Yeah.
So we need to add the 100 or the 150 back in.
So you're reducing revaluation by $10,000, and we're adding $150,000 in ARPA funds to the road budget. Those are the two changes I have.
Do we want to do anything with regard to the school $160,000? Do we want to change that number at all now? Or do we want to let the Board of Ed do that afterwards?
I I think that needs to come from a motion from their board for the request for funding
Right.
first. So yes, but that probably won't be through till.
I guess
their
the board
meeting on
phrase to do that.
26th.
Okay, I'm sorry, okay, that's fine, that's fine.
Tony, what was the $10,000 adjustment here?
The assessor. We did first one.
Thank you.
And the 150 we're putting back in will not impact the bottom line.
It does not.
coming out of it.
Correct, it will not.
Okay, just make sure.
Out of curiosity, do you know what if taxpayers paid for the full requested road maintenance budget, $850, what the difference in the tax increase would be?
Yeah, give me a second.
It was a little over $1 million per mill
I
rate
do
for
it
one,
handy pretty quickly.
per point on the mill
Let's
rate.
see.
If it's, but if that's specific, if everything else we do stays the same.
Stays the same.
So, you know, I mean, the impact is gonna, yeah, it's gonna depend on what else is done, but it's not gonna, it's not,
If you funded $200,000, the mill rate goes to a 4.44% increase.
From
What's the extra?
3.99.
So it's 3.99, 47.08. And that would be the new money.
40 versus 46.88.
Correct.
So it goes up literally 0.2, like what you were saying.
Thank
And
you.
it's, it seems marginal, but it's like
No, it-
47, 46, 46.
Yeah, it makes, it all adds up.
All right, so that's it for the capital budget.
That's the hardest one, really, I think.
I think we spent the yeah, the
Yeah,
other
it
ones
was
are,
different
there's many small changes that we've made in terms of, I shouldn't say many, but there are small changes where we really concentrated is on the major ones, so. But just stated, this impacts it more severely than a little bit from each part.
And I know that it's incredible, from my perspective, that you two guys have actually figured out where those things should come from. It's not arbitrary. I know that it seems arbitrary when we look at these numbers. It's like, oh, 200,000, you know, whatever, out of this piece and that piece. But Tony knows where it can come from. I mean, and Mika obviously knows also, because he's been spending, probably has a bed in his office. So
I
it's,
should have got phone, so.
when we look at it, it just looks like a spreadsheet of numbers, but I know it's way more than that when you're talking about the difference in this project versus that piece of another project. You have to know the detail in every one of those projects, and I'm just,
The process, you know, when Tony starts out, it's really under his guidance. I'm not just, you know, saying because he's a good guy and he's helped us so much, but, you know, he started out by saying, where do you want it to be? You know, and it's like, you know, so jokingly you say, well, yeah, well, if you ask me, I'd like it to be under 2%, for sure. You know, that's what I'd like us to get it to, is just, because I know it's gotta be something, because we've got all these increases. But, and he said, well, can't get it there unless we really go way up. And then the next part of the process, okay, so where now tell me where you really want it to be. And that's where we came up with the 4%,
Yeah.
saying, no, let's, as a board, I feel we should at least make that much of an effort to try to cut it back.
It's hard.
Is my sense, because it is very, very hard.
And I would say specifically when it goes to the operating budget, this currently has no reduction in either of the education budgets,
right,
which is like 65 to 66%.
yeah, a huge percentage of it, right.
Which carries on the tradition that
That's why I said,
depicted in that chart.
that's why I said, that's why
This
you
is
need
what
to chart
that-
to start the evening, yes.
Yeah, we
It's-
have tight controls.
So that's how we are where we are.
I only pointed that because I know how much work you guys did on
Thank you.
it, and I don't want to sit here and spend the night picking apart those things, except for the roads, because everybody drives on the roads.
And that's exactly why we do this, because everybody's got a different, you know, different view that they're taking on it, so.
So I'll just go through each department here. You want me to go through the
Do we need a
departments?
motion on this?
Yeah, did you vote on that?
We did
No, we
not.
Oh, okay.
do we need a motion on the,
I'll make the motion to approve the capital budget as stated with the changes to the two lines for the $10,000 reduction on the reval and the assessor line, and the $150,000 addition to the road repair and payment coming from, ARPA funds.
Funds to be determined
Funds,
by,
yeah.
grant funds to be determined.
Okay.
Second?
Discussion.
Thank
We'll
you.
beat it to death pretty good.
Yeah.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Now on to the operating.
Okay. So the first department I wanted to discuss was the Board of Selectmen. I'll just highlight some of the major changes here.
Which sheet are we
Is this in the
looking at?
detail?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, if you look at the detail,
This is the detail.
you would go to each
Yeah.
department.
So the first one is, the first page is a summary, the second page is the, starts with Board of Selectmen.
So you can see the way the document is outlined here. You've got the department requests in the first column, the Board of Selectmen proposed in the second column. I think the major item here is the general professional services. That has $50,000 for a planner. That's probably the major item.
We also, you see an increase in regards to printing and binding, and that reflects our intent to do some sort of a newsletter. in addition to
Right,
those.
those are
Oh.
the two ads.
And I understand that that may be something that's funded through advertising.
Yeah, I wanted to I can pass around a copy of a magazine that used to be done before we had the newsletter, so if you want to take a look at that, if you don't remember it coming out. But that's an option that I would hope we could also consider, or consider in place of printing the newsletter again, because it's designed to kind of support the business district, and I thought Mika's doing a lot of work to revamp our Economic Development Commission, get some professional help with that as well, and I thought that it might pair nicely with a place for our businesses to advertise and really attract interest. So if we went that route instead, there wouldn't be a cost for printing. There would still be a need for personnel to develop the content and get it over in time, et cetera. But it's a little less onerous than having that. Because we did, make a big stride in this respect last year by eliminating this. It was for cost reasons, and I think there was a little bit of an understanding of like the use it was being made of, that wasn't a good place to allocate funds. So before we go all the way back to that, if we were to at least try this for a year, we might find out we don't have to spend that money, and we can still get the document.
Try something like this, like this.
Yeah, like this.
The printing costs then would come from the advertising dollars, so okay.
There's a company that actually does that. I think they're operating in Essex
Essex,
right now.
correct.
Essex printing,
And,
yeah.
and there seems to be interest, I've been told by others, that they seem to be at least interested in possibly doing it in our area. So I think it's absolutely worth something to pursue, so I appreciate that. That's,
Yeah, so if we could save the taxpayers some money by not having to,
Yep.
to fund this. And if it doesn't work out the following year, we can go back to it.
So are you suggesting not adding that increase this year?
Correct, yeah.
Do you want to take that out?
Which is what line item? The
Printing and binding?
Printing and binding,
54,400.
thank you. And can you speak, I know it's a small line item, but the 54,310 legal ads? What's that about?
Only the legislature would allow us to not have to do printing legal ads.
Okay.
Good,
It's
but we
like,
left
like for the
newspaper.
town meeting, how they have to have it in
Oh,
the newspaper, so
I
you have to buy
see.
space and
Okay.
just by statute, you have to do certain things.
Every
and
year,
that-
there's an attempt to stop that up in Hartford, and then the newspaper publishers come in.
That's
The big money lobbyists come in.
Where they
knock
make a
it
lot
down.
of their money.
And I think
But we can try with our representatives again.
the other item I'll point out, and Tony has pointed this out previously, there's additional dollars, you'll see the 19 administrative salaries. It's just that we're splitting personnel. You'll see a decrease on the finance department because some of the time involved with employees will be split between the finance and Board of Selectmen.
Right, we just moved some salaries around, that's all.
So that's why if you're looking at the increase, you'll see, but you'll also see a counter decrease on another line.
I'll just mention, we reduced labor negotiations and legal fees based on our anticipated litigation, based on our anticipated, what we think will be our workload. So we can go through all these and then you can make a motion if you always do it at the end. Probate court, we did not change. Town clerk, this was another area where there was an increase requested. That was in the regular assistance line. That was brought from 106, 170 to 101, 313 to reflect the increase being just the cost of living. I think that's the major of this one.
What's the 100% increase for postage?
Because of the, so you've had some increases in here because of the election.
Oh, that's right, thank you.
The similar election supplies, you'll see that also went up. Registrar of voters, we didn't make any adjustments to. Government access television, we reduced just a meeting schedule a little bit to, but it's still an increase of 24% over the previous year, just not as much as was originally in the budget.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about our intention with government access, and it is part of our strategic plan to make sure that we have the transparency and the access for people. And I think we all know that lots of people are watching it on YouTube, so that's all we're doing right now. But the use of the television and trying to get all viewers, there are some people who honestly don't know how to use YouTube, so when it's not on their cable channel 79, they're a little bit lost. So I imagine there'll be opportunities in the future, especially if we can apply for grants.
Right.
That if we need additional equipment or we need to
Even
bolster.
additional hours.
Yeah.
They've applied for additional hours too.
Yeah, so maybe this is an opportunity where we can in fact find grant money. I just feel a little self-conscious about taking this number down when we know it's an important commitment, but I think if we can look for grants, hopefully we can maintain our excellent services.
Next is,
I agree, thank you.
next budget is general admin. And this is one where we'll probably have an adjustment to insurance, but it's not for this meeting. So,
Will the board of finance do it?
yes, I'm sure they will. Information systems, there's no adjustment there. Same for finance.
If you looked at this and you feel that there's something.
Yeah, just feel free to stop.
Just make sure you stop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tax collector, we made no adjustments. Assessor, she's going into a reval year, again, we made no adjustments. That's her one increase is that general professional services.
And Tony, that's separate from what we're doing in the capital budget.
Right, yeah.
They go
Capital
together.
budget's for outside people to help us.
Are we still on the tax assessor?
Yep.
Okay. The 111% increase, 54,640, subscriptions
They
and
increased,
publications.
yeah, they increased the cost of the books for the motor vehicles. And how they access the pricing for
that's right.
motor
I remember
vehicles.
her talking about that,
Yeah.
okay. Gosh, so much of this is just out of our control.
A lot of it is. Let's see, this is appeals, not much there. Board of Finance. I think, I made one adjustment here, it was the audit. I think we're gonna have to pay more for our audit. We currently share that cost with the Board of Education, and we're just getting pricing in, and I think it's gonna be a lot more. So, that's why I increased it.
So Tony, do you think they'll have to also increase theirs?
Yes.
Do we get price, we've had the same auditors been
For a few years, yeah.
doing it for many, many years.
Yeah.
And do we typically go out to bid?
We go out to bid every 4 years.
Okay, 4 years.
Yeah. And the time the bids come back, the Board of Finance makes their decision. Do we want to change auditors? Do we want to pay more? Do we want to keep the same auditor? It's sort of an evaluation they go through at the time.
Sure. Understood.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing.
Yeah.
And this is based on an assumption or that we already have indicated?
This is an assumption.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I'll get more refined information as we progress here.
But Tony, I imagine we save money by going in with the Board of Ed.
We do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any opportunity to also ask Amity if we want to all share, or is that way too?
I've never seen that before, actually. Town share and auditor.
With the regional district?
Yeah. Not sure.
Doesn't necessarily mean it can't be done.
Right, I just. Plan and zoning, there's no change there.
I had a question about plans. I actually don't know if it belongs in plan zoning or somewhere else, but the plan of conservation development that
Yeah.
has to be done.
Right.
Money is allocated in the
There's-
current budget?
So if you look at the third line,
Yeah,
there's $20,000 in the current budget,
yeah,
and there's $20,000 in this year's budget.
okay.
So it's 40.
40,000.
That's what you have for that.
And the RFP is out now?
Right? They're due, I think, March. So we'll see.
Then we'll
That's
find
fine.
out. Okay.
They have to adjust that number based on where the RFPs come back. Zoning appeals, that's pretty much there. Center building, this is all utilities, it's pretty stable. Former firehouse, same thing. Police. The police department, there's a number of adjustments here. The major item is, we removed the extra officer that they requested, which you'll see in 50220, which is their salary line. Holiday pay, it's 50460. College incentives, 50600.
Huh?
And uniform allowance, 51,800. And that's one more. DFIB certification. Those are all related to the extra officer.
Benefits as well.
There's also, there's adjustments in benefits, but in this particular
Mhm.
budget,
Okay.
those are all related to that extra position. Those are the major items, there's a few minor ones throughout the budget. That's the major reduction.
Tony, I'm sorry, I have a question on the former fire station.
Sure, yeah.
If that thing gets built up, when does it come online?
Not here.
Not in this budget.
I know, I
Right,
know.
right.
Do we know when it's gonna be done?
If they start in the fall, and it's a 6-month construction, you're probably not looking until next spring. So there might not be much
Not much.
Yeah.
Okay.
to follow the budget year.
But at that point, are we gonna be asked to put personnel in there to, manage the place, open the doors, whatever it is? Hire people and, more electricity, more everything?
From my perspective,
Yeah,
there's a resource, Tony and I have been looking at the possibility of using grant money to fund the resource. I feel that there is a resource required. I don't want it to be a building that it's not used because there's no plans for it, specific plans. So
Right.
I'd like to, in answer to your question, I'd like to see a resource, so there would be personnel dollars associated with that. We could potentially fund it with some grant money on a temporary basis, but it's something we need to look at on a longer term basis as well.
right,
We've also discussed having recreation over there.
right.
From here?
Yeah,
So that there will be people there.
so they, yeah,
They would be able to.
Do something.
Oversee and manage
Right.
and, so
Yeah.
it would just be an extension of, town hall, if you will, here as well, so.
Right.
There's a couple of things we're looking at. But I do feel, and this will, the topic as we get into the center building construction, once we have a plan and we know what we're gonna do there, I do feel we need some degree of leadership in terms of managing activities for a community center and making it something that's, that's
Yeah.
viable and vibrant and used a lot. Similar to the way the library does what they do.
Yeah,
This one, find out.
Oh,
Yeah, just a friendly reminder that there is a time limit on us tonight, guys.
okay. I think we're doing all right.
So just going to the police, if we're okay with that.
Sure.
Oh, I've lost my tab. So, Tony, how significant would the change be if we did fund?
The extra position?
Yeah.
The-
Because I hate to call it an extra position, because they aren't at, if I remember our conversation, they're still below staff, or at least their historical staff?
Historical staff,
Yeah.
yes, and, you know, I thought Ron did a good job of outlining how, you know, why he felt it was very important, our deputy chief Smith did. Yes, in other words, at our capacity, we were at 26, and we're not at 26 now. This is just to get us closer to that number. I think it's, we're at 22, and this was to get to 23, or, you know, along those lines. I don't remember exactly the particulars I can look at, but, correct, you're right about that. It's,
I have some reservations about that omission. Understanding the significant, or at least what I assume to be a significant cost associated with bringing on any full-time employee, you know, understanding fringe and all of that. But I also know how stretched thin our police department is, even from calls I've made, and they're so responsive, and I really appreciate the hard work they're doing at the limited capacity they have. But given some of the stats they provided of the increase in specific types of instances or crimes, I just wonder if that's something we should,
it's certainly something that we did consider.
yeah,
I can
well,
tell you,
sure,
you know,
sure, and I don't mean to imply you
Yeah,
didn't.
no, I know, but you know, it's a couple of things. It's, I can tell you feedback, I've gotten feedback similar to what you've outlined. I've also gotten feedback saying, you know, how does Bethany deal with not having a police department at all? I've gotten
Well, that
how
is
much is Orange paying for, you know, on a per capita basis? You look at it compared to us, where, you know, there's a lot of other factors that go into it. You know, when it comes to public safety, you don't want to compromise from that perspective. But at the same token, there's a limit to what we can afford, from my perspective. So this was kind of a compromise, knowing that we just did recently hire 3 more officers. We had been down to 18 at one point in time, so we were woefully lower than where we thought we should be. And to their credit, you know, for the most part, the town didn't really feel the absence to the degree that it was dangerous.
Yeah,
And I really give them a lot of credit for that, because that's way below your staff, and you only have that many people. So it's an area that there's, again, not that many items where you could hold off on to make the kind of impact that we were looking to make, and this was one of those areas.
I can tell you it's about $130,000.
Okay. And how would that, I mean, I don't know that you'll be able to just spit this out there, Tony, but how would that compare to costs associated with overtime, absent of having an
Yeah.
additional staff member? Just a consideration, because overtime adds up.
It does, and it always adds up. And what I did do is look at that very specifically, asked the chief to provide us information on that correlation I'm looking for, and I looked at a number of different towns as well, and looked at the correlation, the number of people they have in the overtime. There's not it's not a parallel line, but it's not an exact science either, so not that there should be an exact correlation to, I'm under people, that means my overtime goes way up. It doesn't pan out that way when you do the line on a graph, if you will. There's times where you have less people and you have less overtime. There's times where you have more people and you have more overtime. So it really kind of depends on the circumstances. I'm sure that's what's happening in the town. You know, you could have a ton of people, you could have full workforce and have 3 major crimes. Well, your overtime's gonna go up, period. You know, so there's not a direct correlation there, but it's a good and valid and something that we looked at.
Mika, I know done the math, done the work, are we still very, at or near the top of per capita cost for towns our size in terms of security?
If you look at it, David, but unfortunately, I'll be honest with you, what I'm having a challenge at, and I'm trying to find a resource that can really help us with this, is very difficult, because if you look at some of the, for example, I did it on the fire department standpoint also, from a fire department, ours versus we have volunteer, Orange has volunteer. If you look at the Orange line item, Orange volunteer numbers are low. They, you know, so, but they don't, what they do is they spread their costs amongst other areas. And the perfect example is a very big piece of our cost is hydrants, and you don't necessarily see that in their budget in the same place. So there's other items that they show. So what I'm trying
So
to do.
what do
now-
they include in the budget that
That's-
counts as
So
police?
even like so if I just take it from Wilton, from Easton, from Prospect, I can tell you there were 13 other municipalities they looked at comparing police departments. If you just take it and you take, what are they spending, how many do they have? Correlations, yeah, we don't look so good. You know, or I shouldn't say we look so good, we just seem to spend more money. Public safety is more important to us, you know, from that, could be that simple of an answer.
Yeah,
But we seem to spend more. But now I have to really kind of take a look at it, and I just talked to a firm just recently, last week, who said they think they can do what, you know, they have I would be able to get the information that I'm looking for in such a way as to define very specifically that there is a line item for line item, orange to orange comparison, and see what we say. And you know, I mean, I'm just kind of geeky when it comes to that type of thing, because I just find that's very interesting. But it's also just provides perspective. You know, it just gives you a good idea. So then when you're talking to people, when we're saying this is what we're doing and why, you've got something that's behind it and says where you got that information, why you feel it's important. So I'd like to do all that, but in the meantime, my sense is this isn't the right time for us to add another body at the police department. That's my sense. And, you know, Tony went along with it, and I've talked to both police and deputy chief and deputy chief, just indicating what our rationale was. Obviously, they feel differently, but that's where I am. But I sincerely hope the board, if they feel differently, they will also make that known, and let's get it back in there and see what we got.
In the context of what you just said, Mika, does our volunteer fire department respond to instances outside of our town boundaries more than other volunteer fire departments?
Good question. I have no idea. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. I know that they do. They all of the departments obviously have that agreement,
Yeah.
but I don't know if, you know, we go out more or we ask more, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. It's not easy, not a difficult one to give the answer to. I'm sure Sean knows. And also, please understand the example that I just used was just that. It's an example.
Sure,
You know, from
I'm
fire
just-
departments.
No, of course.
So,
I just want to note on this for the overall police department budget, you know, this suggests not, you know, adding the additional officer at this time. It's still an increase. And when we looked at that first sheet of the last 10 years, public safety is one of the largest increases of investment, you know, so there's a continual increase year over year, and the 21% over these, from 2015
I'd be
to
curious
2014.
And I want to also mention that this budget does not have a cost of living adjustment for police officers because the contract's still in negotiation. So you'll see there's a 4.35% increase in the police officers' budget line, but that's mostly for step increases that officers get. It does not have a cost of living adjustment, which will impact many of those lines.
So
And,
we're carrying the potential cost of that in contingency.
Correct.
and Steve or whomever, is public safety exclusively police and fire?
Police, fire, medical services, animal control, and building department.
Thank
They're the ones in a row. They're all twos. If you look at the summary sheet, they're all the ones that begin with 1, 2.
you. Okay. So
gives you an
just-
idea, if you look at the very first page on the summary, it'll give you an idea of what those budgets are, so you can see where the big dollars are.
Thank you.
assuming that's dominated by police and fire,
Correct.
not animal control.
Right.
Police is 3.66, fire is 1.23, medical is 324, okay, and animal control is 1.5.
Thank you. My last question with respect to police is the telephone versus cellular?
That's a reclass of expense. I
Okay.
believe, the chief mentioned it when he was here. You'll see, if you look at the previous year, there were some charges in the telephone line that were really cellular related.
Okay.
So, they moved those to the correct line. The total doesn't really change that much.
No.
But in
Matter of fact,
terms
it goes
of,
down, I think the total goes down if you have to.
yeah, no, actually optimize some things, but
Okay.
telephone being your system and your dial tone and circuits and things of that nature associated with that, and cellular being exactly that. And the cellular went down a little bit because they've gone on FirstNet, which is a great service for emergency services, from the cellular perspective, so.
Tony, the labor negotiations line here is simply for negotiator or?
It's for a labor attorney. It's not just negotiation, but it's for any other labor matters that
But it's
require.
professional services, not the negotiator, anticipated negotiation.
It's for both,
Oh, they're both in that same.
correct. So the town one, we reduced the town one because the contract settled, but this one we kept the same because the contract is not settled.
And we're pretty consistent with this every year, right?
Pretty much,
Isn't that right?
yeah.
We don't actually negotiate. It's just services to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the next department is fire. There's a number of adjustments here. It's just an attempt to, the major ones, of course, we discussed the wages. Mika mentioned that earlier in the program, and then evening. There's a number of, one in particular is the building line, which was reduced,
What number is it, Tony?
53530.
Thank you.
Even the chief said he's not exactly sure where that is, what he's gonna need there. So we will just have to wait and see and work with him throughout the year if he has got any unanticipated repairs. Trying to see if there's any major reductions.
But that's not capital?
Well, they're mostly like maintenance related items,
Okay.
like replace a motor, replace
The air
the
blower.
blower,
Okay.
stuff like that. It's not like a major replacement of like a boiler, mostly components. The training line was reduced by $5,000.
Training, how much training line?
It's a training line, that's, also gonna be,
Oh, got it, I'm sorry, I was looking at training OT here, I'm sorry, 40435, 50435, sorry.
What is the training line?
They provide training in that for,
What number?
54630.
Okay.
So it holds it at previous levels, but not at the increase it has to. It's-
What is volunteer incentives, 52225?
Volunteer incentives is a program where we provide in a retirement vehicle, an amount of money for each firefighter that has to, there's a criteria, if you go a certain number of calls, make a certain number of meetings, that the fire department administers, and then we split that money up amongst those volunteers as a sort of an incentive to, keep them on the force, have them respond to calls. But we've had a long history of this incentive.
You're saying that's a retirement vehicle, so it's.
Yeah, it's like an
It's an
investment.
investment account?
Yeah, it's
And
an
that's,
investment account.
that's in addition to or separate from the abatement?
Correct, right, that's separate from the abatement.
And the abatement doesn't show up here, that's.
The abatement shows up in the, I can show you what that is.
That shows up in
The grand list,
revenue, yeah.
it's in the grand list numbers.
Do most municipalities
Yes.
do that?
Most
For
municipalities have
volunteers.
some sort of incentive for volunteers.
And this
It's
year,
performance
yeah,
based.
this year it's a big shift this year, it's a substantially increased.
Well, that's the
Or
other
for-
program, but this one.
This one is-
No, understood, yes, you have abatement.
This one here, we typically increase based on the cost of living adjustment for employees.
Okay.
And assuming the same kind of performance, the number of people who make the performance.
Right,
We're
right.
gonna continue.
It's usually the
Which
same
is a
people.
whole point.
The whole point is to keep it a volunteer organization.
Yeah. And then that hydrant number is really high, Tony, that's the water
That's the charge for the lines.
from the regional water?
Correct. It's sort of like, you know, it's like the legal ads.
Yeah.
The legal
The
ad.
legal ads.
Shake off, so that'd be right.
We have no choice.
So,
They
but
tell us
those,
how much
those
it is.
are lines just to hydrants, so if that cost should only, well, of course, if RWA increases the cost, there's
Well, that's what's
that.
happening.
But otherwise, it increases only if we increase the number of hydrants?
No, this is only if RWA increases the cost.
I
Okay.
think if we increase the number of hydrants, though, it will also increase
It
the
would,
cost.
okay.
For-
Then would we have to put any hydrants for that?
Yeah, we're changing this.
No, we don't have, I would not.
Well, if we extend the sewers and put the average.
Yeah, like if we were to extend our water lines, then that would be, or could, okay.
You know,
So, there's a meeting scheduled to RWA, just, and that's one of the topics.
All right,
Just because every year the price goes up.
it's expensive.
let's see, medical services, there was no change, I'm just gonna go through the knowledge of it. Animal control was reduced, we did some reorganization there. We were able to save some part-time wages, and we were able to, keep that budget pretty flat. No change to building department. Public works, we made a slight adjustment to contracted services.
But that's
The buyback's it, right?
Does that reflect the proposed increase in seasonal rate?
No, that's in parks.
Oh, that was in parks, okay.
This is for tree work, catch basin cleaning, all the work that we contract out, line painting. Those are the line.
I think it might be worth, not for this year, but considering what it would look like financially if we had our own tree line item, because it could help us get grant money and it's.
Like broken out, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even if we do some stuff internally rather than contract it out. But that's for another
I think
time.
a good thing to do, because it's your sort of, you should be doing these things throughout the year.
Yeah.
So when the budget comes up,
So I was gonna say, we should start talking to Warren now.
Okay.
So it's something, if you don't mind bringing it up, make
Uh-huh.
sure we have,
I'd be happy.
let's
Yeah.
have some conversations with him and let's, so that we can start tracking that and we'll be in a position.
Okay, thank you.
So, Tony, just to understand, when we contract out for tree work, the insurance is borne by the contractor.
correct, that's a big issue.
So it's
Yeah.
already in-house.
The risk.
Consider that.
Yeah, you have to consider the risk part of it, yeah.
This is
But
pretty.
sometimes
Good
we
point,
it's
yeah.
in-house, some don't.
Yeah.
These guys that do tree work,
Something.
they look like acrobats.
Hey, girls do it too, Dave, if you can believe it.
It's true.
Not all
If you're-
guys, but.
Okay, waste management. I just want to highlight that I had to increase the tipping fees. We currently pay $67 a ton approximately. I think it's probably going to go up to about $85 a ton.
Oh, that's a lot.
And we currently pay more for recycling.
So that's just for all that's all trash,
Right.
not the stuff we weigh and scale.
That's all.
That's all.
That's okay.
I got a sheet here. Yeah, we clearly pay most for recycling.
Is that because we recycle more than we?
No, because we don't charge people to bring the recycling. So in other words, we charge for bulky waste over the scale, we charge for some of the tonnage from the municipal solid waste, garbage, and then Hauler brings it in over the scale. Well, obviously, we don't charge for recycling. So, and not only is it more per ton to get rid of, but we don't charge.
So
We
the
are-
collectors, the companies that are collecting people's recycling are not charged for recycling, they're only charged for solid.
Correct.
And we pay for it in our taxes.
Right.
That's how we pay.
Right.
We charge for it, not what we do it.
We are.
Right, it's not a
Yeah.
user fee, correct. Right.
We are expecting some of the fees to be increased. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
We're looking at different plans. One of the things that I'd like to see us consider is, we don't really use the permits the way that most towns use the permit, the transfer station, nominal fee every year for those people who are using it, might be something that people might not be too resistant to. I think everybody understands. I can tell you as a resident, if somebody said, you gotta pay $25 a year for my permit to go to I could do it without even thinking, because I expect that everybody does that. So the different ideas that we can talk about in ways to raise revenue. I was also very surprised that we didn't, sorry, too much time we have, but, the other thing, I'm very surprised that the glass didn't make as big an impact as I thought.
Yeah,
it
I
would.
actually wanted to
How's
ask
that
about
working?
that.
Made it super difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to do a presentation on the transfer station for you.
Yeah, they're probably, let's target
We
maybe.
did one a few years ago, if you remember.
Yeah.
It'd probably be time for an update.
Yeah, I'd like to know how the glass is going.
Yeah.
That's-
Cause that was a pilot program,
Right.
right? Oh.
And we are piloting a diversion for food scraps. Because food scraps are making
Huge.
a big amount of this.
Yes, what do you mean? Oh, we're looking to pilot.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of interest.
Mhm.
Yep,
Can't get enough interest, we won't be able to do it.
yeah. That I think can make an impact, in particular because that would directly affect tipping fees.
Tony, you do have a change in the bulky waste disposal, you're going from about 116, we're gonna go down to 87.5.
Right. I think that people are headed there for some brush grinding, which I think we could probably put off for a year.
In terms of bulky waste, what we're charging for people to do it is still okay? We're gonna adjust that number.
You could probably adjust it slightly.
That we can
But
do
it's not bad.
during the year.
Yeah, the net cost is about $38 a ton. It's probably the best of the four items. Building maintenance. So building maintenance, the salary increases, that's directly related to pool and gym. That's really the only change, which is not for a few departments. So if you hold off on that, I'll explain that when we get to pool and gym.
Is that like 5024
Yeah.
Thank you.
Human services, we just, she had requested a position, a full-time position for clerical, we kept it at part-time.
I expect it to come up again, and I can tell you, be inclined, no, but.
Does it impact the ability to do programming, we think, if we don't increase?
It would probably.
So we might hear-
We should, yes.
Well, and just in the same way we're talking about potentially the community center, we need to have staffing help there. Maybe so there is a conversation that we've had a couple of times at the strategic planning committee about pulling all these groups together, library, human services, recreation, and seeing if there's a way that, by pooling their resources, we can get everything done, but it won't involve increasing positions. In the dream world, right?
It's not, I think we're gonna see that, we're gonna discuss that tangibly, this over the course of the next 6 months to a year.
The next, I want to bring to your attention is the pool. So if you,
So is
in
that
recreation,
It is.
yeah, so there's a number of items on the pool. It's about $200,000 in total.
To zero.
That's a lot of it.
There's some recreations.
Yeah.
So, the one, if you start with recreation, recreation has in it pool director, lifeguards, and swim instructors. The pool director is in the second line, regular assistants. The part-time seasonal has the swim lesson instructors, and the pool lifeguards, and some security personnel. Part-time maintenance has custodian for the pool.
Hmm.
And all that total is $126,799.
Are these people who are gonna be let go, or are they just people who are hired?
There will be some people that are hired that won't be hired, and there will be some people that will be let go.
Part-time tonight?
All part-time. So that's $126,000. If you go to the next budget, pool and gym, it's the part-time maintenance and lower. That'd be 50330 through 55130. Those are all the costs that can be eliminated from the budget. The regular all other line, that's half of, Brad, actually it's Brad, half of the salary, so that goes to building maintenance because we can't get rid of half of Brad.
Nor do we want
I'm
to.
sure he's watching too, we don't care. So Brad gets moved to the building maintenance, and the rest of that will get removed.
So Tony, he'll be available to do other work,
Correct.
so, and all the other
Anybody
projects
who
that
knows
need his
Brad
attention. Yeah.
knows that
He's not gonna stop.
he won't stop.
No, because
That, that accounts for the top line and building
Correct.
that's going up.
That's correct, right, that's correct. So that totals
So that number-
55,529.
what was it total?
55, 529. So if you add those two together, that totals most of the 200,000. There's another 10,000 in benefits related to FICA and Medicare for the part-time positions that are eliminated. So if you add all that together, it's roughly $200,000. That's the impact of the operating budget. So if this goes forward as it's presented, as of July 1, we'll not have funding for a pool to operate.
Does this affect any longtime employees, or is this?
There's probably
These are people.
people, yes,
It is,
yes.
very, yeah,
It's a tough-
it's a tough.
Also probably changes what they do for summer camp. This
I
year.
mean, somebody might be able to, John might be able to reallocate, the custodian position in the pool and gym is vacant. So that's a vacant position for in rec, and rec doesn't have it, they don't either, right? No, so the custodian piece is actually vacant currently, so that won't impact anybody. Some of the other positions he may be able to reassign, I'm not sure, to different positions within the department.
The piece about the summer camp, I guess going forward, last year, they didn't use the beach,
Right.
but they still did some swimming, bus people, some people lifeguard, et cetera.
Right.
I don't know if they've already decided for the summer, since.
Not sure because of the beach, right, they're gonna be at the end.
Maybe they're
Yeah.
gonna pool it, so maybe they've already made that adjustment, but
I think they were planning on,
busing too.
because of the roof and the work over there, they were planning on
Right.
shutting it down, so they were gonna do something else.
Yeah, but I guess the summer camp itself is more self-sustaining, so if they
It
did
is.
want to go somewhere
Yeah.
else to swim and
It
they need
is.
lifeguards, they would just, that's part of their fee.
Yeah.
Have we also adjusted their fees?
Yes, the fees
This is-
are,
Because there's lots of fees involved.
right,
They don't
about
go to this.
$40,000 in fees.
The approximate 450 to 500,000 that we're talking comes off the budget is net. In other words, it's greater in terms of the expense, but then when you factor in the fees, it brings it back down to that number.
Do we, I mean, I get your point now, that if they keep going in the summer and some of these salaries for the pool really continue on because they're doing it at another pool, but they still need libraries and things, are we cutting a little bit of a margin off of them that they might still have the cost?
I went through this with them
Okay.
and asked them to identify to me what costs related to the pool would be eliminated from the budget, and that's what they presented to me.
All right, good.
I can certainly review it with them again, and if there's any adjustments to be made, we can certainly adjust it later on in the process
Okay.
at the Board of Finance meeting.
There's been a good amount of discussion.
Sure,
It's not, you know,
no doubt.
it needs to be-
You didn't just pull it out of your head.
So, but it's, like you said, difficult.
Okay, I'll keep going. The library, there were no adjustments, just there any remaining.
Human services?
Yeah, we can look through that. I just, Conservation Commission, no adjustments. Economic Development, no adjustments. Wetland, no adjustments. The only last remaining adjustment was to employee benefits. And that's just an ongoing, other few things. I removed the benefits related to the human services position and the police officer. And I also, healthcare continues to evolve. So as those costs change, I change those. They're getting lower, actually. And the same thing with retirement, those figures came out also, so I adjusted that.
And yet services what it is.
That service is what it is, right?
The last one that there was on was, capital budget. Questions? Thoughts? Adjustments?
I have a question for the Parks Department. Can you
Oh, I'm
repeat
sorry.
what rentals were?
You're right.
Is that number?
Rentals?
Yeah.
Those are porta potties.
Oh, that's right, and they had to add different ones and different.
Right.
Yep, got it.
I hear those are a lot more expensive this
They
year.
certainly are. I think the market's starting to,
What?
the market is contracting the number of providers.
People run out of business?
But where do we
Or they
put
just
They're
them?
buying,
they're rolling them up.
right?
Oh,
Mergers and acquisitions.
Right. Right.
Venture, yeah.
So that's the operating budget.
Do we want to,
Since in the interest of time, we can make a motion
so
to.
when we have a discussion, on it, that'd be great.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget as proposed in the Board of Selectmen proposed budget lines.
I second.
Operating
One
budget.
adjustment? Yeah. There's one adjustment. It's a $5,500 reduction to the printing and binding and acknowledgement of the change in the format of the newsletter.
With that adjustment.
I got you, Steve. I'll make it, yes. That's printing and binding that's the newsletter, first Selectmen special.
Correct.
Motion made by Steve, seconded by David. Now it's time for us to have a discussion. Is this what we want to go with, or is there a feeling, be it the police department, be it whatever it might be, we want to go with? Any changes? It's difficult. It's, if you're not looking at it every day, it's hard to come in and say, this is what you should do. I understand that, but it's
It's gotta be hard even if you're looking at it every day. You're not getting
sometimes harder,
anybody.
actually, because you realize the implications.
Well, and it's, I know how hard you guys are working on this, and,
I just want to bring to your attention that it would be a 4.4% expenditure increase and a 3.6% tax increase and a 3.97% mill rate increase for real estate and personal property.
That is what we will be presenting to the board.
oh, not 399?
No,
Mill rate?
because you reduced $10,000 from the
Oh,
assessor
how about
and
that?
$5,500 from the printing and binding.
What's, I think, just to speak what I see from everything that I've been exposed to at this point in time, the challenge that we have, the most significant challenge we have is the lack of growth. Our grand list just, we reference a grand list, but it's truly just, generally speaking, the lack of growth. What really hit us on this one was the decline as property taxes in automobiles, as far as our grand list is concerned. If a lot of people buy cars, we would have bought new cars, we would be probably in the situation that we find ourselves in.
So it's really that, not housing.
Well,
Because our school population is increasing.
if you look at the building,
Absolutely.
if you look at the sheet here,
Sorry, Mika, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. No,
the real estate only went up 0.38%.
So the real estate did go up.
It wouldn't have gone up if we didn't have the Toll Brothers development.
Toll
Okay.
Brothers was the primary driving force behind the real estate. Without that, it would have been significantly worse. It actually turned out to be, what, number 3 or 4 in terms of the.
Yeah, they were in the top.
Right, correct,
Five, I
correct,
think.
correct, yeah.
Right, so, and when I say growth, folks, sometimes it seems to focus in one area, and that's not what this is about. This is about identifying all different areas of potential growth, and we just need to do whatever we can to identify it, nurture it, and move forward with it in terms of us changing this trend and being able to certainly either improve and or continue with the level of services that folks are looking for, that our residents are looking for. So that's just a side note.
You mentioned it I think one of the last meetings about the 20-year trend, we can start that, but we won't see any result until 20 years down the line.
Right.
You gotta start, but it's not gonna help us. I mean, some of those things, some of the growth things you're talking about.
If we can be the stake in the ground, as they say, it's not a bad place to be. Somebody's got to do it.
But
So,
the reassessment of our real estate could help
The mill rate.
the
the
mill
mill
rate.
rate, not the tax,
Correct.
tax.
We
Which
need
right
more
now
money.
is still 3.63, Tony, with that adjustment?
That would be the,
3.97.
No, that's the mill. I'm
Point
saying,
nine seven is what, if you guys say you
Just
vote
as
yes.
mill.
yeah,
Vote
I'm asking
3.97.
tax.
It will change when the Board of Finance gets all of it.
Wait, where am I supposed to be? I'm in the wrong place.
No, you're in the right
No,
place.
you're just wrapping around.
We still have 5 minutes.
the tax, the amount to be raised in taxes goes up 3.6%.
Okay, 3.6.
It's just that the mill rate goes up a little higher because the grand list goes down.
Sure.
Yeah. And the only other thing I want to mention before you vote on the operating budget is on the revenues. I implemented the governor's changes, which added about $300,000 or less to grants. And I added a little bit to investment income, a little bit to some of the charges. So by having a robust fund balance, you can take a little more risk on some of your revenues, I think. Sure. Because you don't have to, if you don't hit the mark.
So I would just say that, and Tony did a really great job of laying out for us that we're controlling costs on the town side. So we're asking our town employees and our departments to continue to provide excellent service while we're not allowing their budgets to grow much. And I think that it's important that we send these signals when we're done here, along to both the Woodbridge Board of Education and the AFB Board of Education to say, a lot of pressure on our budget is coming from schools, and with the spirit in which we're asking people to do more with what we can manage here, out of respect for taxpayers, if we can extend that a little further, we'll go even further to control taxes.
Well said. I totally agree with you. It's a message that we will be, if we haven't already made it perfectly clear to them.
We're doing our part here, I think.
They need to,
So
with a
tonight's
little bit of
great.
help on their side,
Would go a long way.
go a long way, and help us maybe do some of the things that we really feel is important, so. Additional discussion? All those in favor of moving this forward to the Board of Finance? Unanimous? Thank you. That concludes our business for today. I'll take a motion for
Motion to adjourn.
adjourn.
Second,
Thank you very much, everyone.
unanimous consent.